Hi there. I'm Mikaria Drake, and today I am going to talk about some sewing tools. And so, first, a little about me. I've been in the cosplay community and sewing for about 20 years, and I'm at a master or professional level in masquerade competition. I have judged masquerades. I've done a lot of panels, demonstrations. I've guested at conventions. So I've kind of been around the block for a lot of things. I've also worked for theater doing costumes, stitching, and David's Bridal doing formal wear. And I had my own business for a few years before the pandemic doing costumes and like custom commissions for people around the world. So I have a lot of experience, but I still love our community and love to pass on anything that I know. So today we're going to talk about some of my favorite sewing tools and some things that maybe you haven't seen before, and some things that maybe you have seen, but they're like my favorite things and I use them all the time. So I wanted to include them. And then some things you might not even think about are associated with sewing, but that you can definitely use for sewing. So, um, the first thing I'm going to start off with is something called a bodkin. And it kind of looks like a pair of tweezers. So, if you can kind of see like this, and it has a little jump ring that you can slide over it, and it has like little grippy guys. And basically, what you use this for is for pulling something through like a small channel. So, like if you have a channel for elastic, which is what I would usually use it for. So, like if I have a strip of elastic, I kind of grab it by the end and then slide that little jump ring, and then like it's nice and snug in there. And then I take your channel and you just push it through, and you can kind of just slide it all the way through, just like that. And sometimes your elastic's going to be smaller than your channel. So what I do is when I get to a certain end, I just pin it, and that way I can keep going. But it's makes it super easy. The only time when this doesn't work is if it's really, really tiny channel, and sometimes you have a hard time pulling this through, and that's when I would use like a safety pin. And safety pins work, but I feel like this is just so much faster, especially when you have like a really long channel. This just makes it so quick because you can just slide, 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 slide. And I really love this for that. So you can get these at any fabric store. They're called a bodkin, bodkin. So they're easy to find just in the notions aisle, but maybe you've never seen it before, but it works super well. I've used this for years and years and years, and I love it. Um, so I'm going to pull this out. So the other thing that kind of goes hand in hand with channels is a turner. And they look like this. Has a ring on one end, and then kind of has like this little hook on the other end. And this is for turning channels inside out. So, like for tiny little straps and things like that. You just stick it through one end, and this is inside out. So you can kind of see my seam allowance right here. And you just push it all the way through. You can stack, you just squish all the material down. And then at the end, you're actually just going to like loop it through so it grabs onto the end, and then just start to pull and use kind of a gentle hand at first. And then you can just slide it through, and it turns that whole thing inside out for you. And then you're all set. And it turns it right inside out super quick. You don't have to sit there and mess with it. Then you can press it, and you have a perfect little strap that you just turn inside out super fast. The only thing I wouldn't use this with is like really sensitive fabric. So anything that's going to like leave runs really easily, like organza, or certain shears and things like that, then it's a little bit harder to use something like this because you want to clip it through the fabric. So in that case, you wouldn't want to use this. But in this case, like with cottons and thicker materials, like it works like a charm every time. So it's super easy to do. And it's really skinny, so it can get through any channel. So I really like this tool. And it's just called a turner, like turner. So super easy. And you can find these in any notions section um, of a fabric store. They're easy to come by. So these two things I use a lot. You can also use this edge to push out corners. So like if you're doing collars or any sort of like spiked scallops or anything like that, this is really good to get into those areas and push out sharp corners so that they really push out because it doesn't have a sharp end. It's nice and round and it's really skinny. So you can push it in there to push out sharp corners once you turn them right side out. Works really good for that. Let's see. All right, so we're going to move on to. I wanted to show this to you because this has been like such a great tool for me. And I got this at the Ren Fair, but you can actually get them on Etsy if you just search for wooden seam rippers. But this one comes on a cool necklace, which makes it super easy. But the end, I can just pull out and flip over, and I have a seam ripper that's nice and hidden. You can easily buy these replaceable blades pretty much anywhere. They're kind of a standard size, so you don't have to go back to the original seller to buy replacement blades. But it's really nice that I can turn it back inside so that it doesn't get stuck, or that it doesn't, it's not sticking out, making sharp little points, like just nice, and I can wear it while I'm sewing and I don't accidentally hurt myself. This end also comes out, so I don't have to keep it on the necklace if I don't want to. And I could also buy another end for this side that has like an awl or like a spiky part that a lot of them come with both sides. And that way you can turn that one inside out too, and both are hidden inside. But I really love this style of seam ripper. It's just so much nicer because I can wear it and easily put it away, and I can just hang it on my wall. And then when I want to grab it, I could just pull it off and then put it back in. So um, each seller kind of has different features, but this one I really like. I had one before this that wasn't on a chain, and it had like an awl on one side and the seam ripper on the other, and you could take them out and interchange them. So I don't know, it's just kind of a neat seam ripper, and I thought I would show it to you guys in case you were in the market for a seam ripper. This one's one of my favorites, and I just really like wood. So this one, they have all kinds of different types of wood that you can purchase for the holder. So it's just kind of a neat thing. All right. The next thing I want to show you is like the best thing if you have carpet or if you're always dropping pins. I know most of us drop pins on the floor like all the time. This is called it's a telescoping magnetic tool, and you can get these at like Home Depot, any store like that. And there's a magnet on one end, and it telescopes so that it's nice and long. So you can like drag this over your carpet and pick up any pins or anything that's hidden. I use this all the time to try and pick up lost pins, or even when I see them, I don't have to bend over and crawl on the ground. I can just just open this up and pick it all up. So it's just like a really super useful tool, and they're really cheap. You can get them on Amazon. It's just a telescopic magnetic tool. So and just gets nice and small, so you can easily keep it in your drawer. So I love this, use it all the time, and I have for years. So it's one of those tools that I continuously use over and over and over again. So super good one. All right. So now we're going to get into some of the more advanced, but not really advanced tools, but things that are a little bit more specific. So one of the things, this is a button spacer. Um, and basically, it gives you even spacing for each one of these sections. And that way you can mark where you want your buttons to be. Um, so I wanted to address some of the comments. So Jessica said, I love trying different seam rippers, and I totally agree with that. And I think you do have to try a bunch of seam rippers before you find the ones that you really like. And I've even seen people use those face razors as seam rippers because they're basically like a covered razor that has so that you use like on your face for like dermaplaning and stuff like that. But you can buy them; they're like little tiny handles with razors on them. And I've seen people use those for seam rippers too. I know people who use X-Acto blades as seam rippers all the time. I don't like that because I feel like I am going to rip something. Like I'm going to just get right through something accidentally. But I have seen people use them. Uh, but you do need to replace your seam ripper blades frequently if you're using them a lot, especially. So the thing I like about this one is there's a replaceable blade, so I'm not buying a new one every single time. I'm just replacing the blade. So but you definitely need to find like the one that works for you. And then Blue Roo One said magnets are so useful, and I totally agree with that. Some of the other tools I'm going to show you are also magnetic, so that will just kind of reinforce that. And yeah, so I'm going to go back to my little button thing. But if you're like me, I absolutely hate spacing buttons. Like I hate it so much because it's so easy to just be a little bit off. And then when you finish your product, your costume or whatever you're working on, you're like, oh my gosh, that's off just like, a tiny bit, but I can notice that it's off. So this lovely thing really helps um, mark exactly where you want. It has um, measuring parts. There's a measure tape on the inside of each one of these. And then also on the tips here, it has a little guide. And then each top is just slightly notched so that you can mark right in these little notches right here and make a mark for your buttons. So it's super helpful. You could also use this side if you wanted to, but it stretches really far apart, and then you can get smaller. So um, these are super useful, especially if you make a lot of shirts where you need to like evenly put buttons down. It just takes a lot of that guesswork out, and they're super useful. I've had this one for a few years. I don't make a lot of button down stuff, but when I do, like I get this bad boy out because like it's so useful. So yeah, this one is super good, and it's just a button spacer. I think you just get it off of Amazon. I didn't have a special place that I purchased it from, but super useful tool, and I love it. Okay. Someone just got this for me recently, and I wanted to show it to you. This is a magnetic tool. This is a magnetic seam allowance or like a seam adjuster. So it has a magnet on the bottom and it has all of these different angles. And if you look inside, um, there's kind of like different indents here. And then this one is round right here. So this is a pretty common tool, especially for quilting, but can definitely use it for sewing. Um, and Jessica says, if I saw that randomly and I have no idea what it was. Yeah, I know. And you would never guess that this is actually like a pretty common tool. But like I said, it's mostly for quilters. But I've found that a lot of things that people use for quilting double and work really well for sewing, but we don't always think that a quilting tool will work for sewing. But I mean, they're both sewing. So this one, it magnets to your plate on your sewing machine. And basically it helps you keep an even hemming stitch, or when you're sewing your hems, you can just stick it right under, and then it keeps that even fold on your fabric, and you can just push it through and it keeps that even seam allowance for you. So it's basically just like the lines that are on your faceplate on your sewing machine, but it's not going to go anywhere and it's going to stay there and keep it nice and straight. Um, and then there's even a round one if you're doing circles or round edges. It'll keep it going round. So that's why there's different edges, because it indents more, so that like this one here you can see is wider. So like that would be like your seam allowance, as opposed to something thinner, um, or not at all. This side has no edge, so if you wanted to use this side, but you can kind of adjust it and move it around to different things. So this one's kind of cool. I haven't, like, I just got this, so I haven't played with it yet, but I wanted to show it to you, because I have seen a lot of people who, when they're sewing, are kind of afraid of sewing straight lines. And I don't mean like afraid, but sewing a straight line can sometimes be the most difficult thing that you're trying to do. And this will kind of help you keep it a nice, perfect, straight hem by holding that fabric there and not letting it move. And that will kind of help you guide it. So it comes in all kinds of fun colors. This is the one I picked, but you can get it in all kinds of fun colors. It's super neat. All right, one of the other things this is a little bit more advanced, but I found these and I thought they were just really neat. And I haven't had a chance to use them yet because I haven't done any pattern drafting. But if you make your own patterns, or sometimes if you print a pattern off of the internet, so if you buy like an independent pattern or an online pattern, and you print it out and you want to change the seam allowance, because sometimes the seam allowance is different for different patterns, or even if you draft something yourself and you want to add a seam allowance to it, you can use a ruler and go through. But I found these little guys, and they're super neat. So these are seam allowance discs, and basically you take the little disc and you line it up with your paper. So like if this is my pattern, I just stick it right over the edge here, and then I put my pencil or through this little hole, and then I just follow it around, and it creates the seam allowance of whatever disc you're using. So this one is really small, but they also have, bigger ones, and then even bigger ones if you want to add a really big seam allowance on there, or a tiny one. So maybe you want a really tiny one. So these are super useful if you're pattern drafting to add your seam allowance onto your patterns. Or like I said, if you want to make a bigger seam allowance for something you purchased. These are super cheap. I just got these off of Amazon. They're just seam allowance discs. I think you could probably find these in the notion sections of some stores. I haven't seen them frequently, like in the notion section. They might be in the quilting section, but I just found them on Amazon, and they're just sewing discs. And you can get all of the different sizes. And Jessica says they remind me of the spiral drawing tools, the toys from back in the day when you did like spirographs. And yeah, I can totally see that. These would probably work if you put these inside a bigger circle and just stuck the marker through the middle, and you could you could also double as a drawing toy. So, but these are really fun. I like these a lot. I like the idea of these. I haven't been able to use them yet, but because I haven't been drafting anything. But one of the things I hate doing is adding seam allowance to things I've drafted. So this makes it just so much easier. All right, so now I have a couple of tools that I think you might not necessarily think are sewing tools, but they work really well for sewing. So one of those is painter's tape. Woohoo! Especially for cosplayers. I think sometimes we forget that tape can be like a really helpful tool, because we're using a lot of weird materials, and the great thing about painter's tape is that it's a light stick, so it's not going to like leave a residue. It's not going to be super hard to pull on and off. But you can use painter's tape to like create guides. I've seen people who, like, if they can put it on your scissors to make the same length cuts over and over and over again, like line up the bottom of your fabric with where you put the tape and make like fringe cuts or something like that. You can use it to secure fabric to a table or to your ironing board, things like that to help it not slide around and it's not going to hurt the fabric. But sometimes when we're doing slippery fabric or we're using, um, a lot of fabric, this helps just kind of keep it where you want it to go and not let it slide off the table, move around. So it's really good for that. You can use it to remove tailor chalk. So if you use tailor's chalk, which um, looks like this. There's these big solid blocks of chalk, and you use the corners to mark. And I use this a lot, but it's hard on some fabrics. But you can, if you have marks, you can use painter's tape to try and get some of that chalk off, so that it's not as noticeable. You can use it to pick up extra threads. So, like if you just ripped out a seam and you have all those little threads poking out, you can stick this down and pick up all that extra thread, and it's a little faster and a little easier. I also like to use lint rollers for that too, help pick up that thread faster and easier. So if you're redoing a seam and you've got all those little pieces of thread sticking out, that works for that. You can also tape down zippers or like thicker things because you can sew over this and just easily rip it off. So you can use it to hold things down while you stitch them on and then remove it easily. The only thing is when you're working with fragile fabrics, I would do a test just to make sure that it's not going to damage that fabric at all. The other thing you can do with this is if you're using super bulky fabrics, you can actually create and extend your presser foot. So like I took my foot here and I just kind of showed you, you can wrap some tape around the edge of the foot. And that way when if this got big bulky fabric, it will push down under and help you get through that fabric a lot easier. So, you can use tape for all kinds of stuff. It's just kind of a good handy thing to have around. So I would use that. They also have, it looks like painter's tape, but this is dressmaker's tape or garment tape, and it's really super skinny. And you can use this to draw lines if you have a dress form of where you need like your major lines to go, like your waistline, your hip line, your bust line. And you can kind of section out your dress form to show you where all of those major points are. And it's just really easily comes on and off, but it's nice and skinny so that it helps you draft. So if you are interested in learning to draft or you want more guides to help you, create lines for what you're drafting, this stuff is great. I have a couple spools of it. Works really well. And the other tool that you might not think for sewing, and Jessica says the presser foot thing is brilliant. Yeah, you can also use, one of the things I've seen a lot of people use for tape is they cut a little piece of a straw and they use the tape to tape it like right in between. And that way, when you're doing cording, you can stick the cording through that little straw and then it just pulls it perfectly so that your cords aren't going all over the place and it just feeds it really quickly. So you can also use tape to do that. You're kind of creating personalized feet just like with tape. So it's pretty cool. This thing is, I think it's called a hemostat or hemostat. It's actually like a doctor's tool, but it's basically like a really skinny clamp. So it has grooved edges in here, and you can clamp it super tight. So you can use this to hold on to stuff when you're, pulling stuff through. I've seen people use this to turn out corners or to stuff things. So like if you're making stuffed animals and you're sewing and you want to really push the stuffing into all the little places, like their little feet or their ears, you can grab the stuffing and then push it in there and like let it go so that it all stuffs in there. So this is really good for getting into little tiny places. And it has a really strong clamp. So you can really hold on to stuff too. So I use this a lot. I actually get these there's a sew and quilt festival here, and there's a guy who just sells like all kinds of stuff like this, scissors, these little tools, nail files, like all kinds of stuff, and I usually get them there. But you can get them anywhere. But they're super useful for that. I like these. And the last thing I want to show you is I have these amazing pattern weights. And I feel like pattern weights are something that I just struggle a lot with because you can either use just like whatever's lying around. um, Blue one says that clamp looks scary. And I mean, it is used for like surgery. So I can totally see how it looks scary. Um, but it's actually really useful. So, and easy to get. So, but so with pattern weights, a lot of times, I think I have some here. Um, Sometimes I got these and just like a bunch of stuff I got thrifted, and I use these sometimes. They're just heavy magnets, or not magnets, but metal weights. I also have these though, and I'm gonna put the link in the chat. These are some pattern weights I got a long time ago, and there's a bag of them. Jessica says she uses uh, exercise weights, which is really funny. So these are the pattern weights that I use, and I absolutely love them. And I can try and have them put the link in the chat for you guys. But they're shaped, so they're plastic weighted pieces, but they are in these L shapes and in these curve shapes, and then there's also straight ones. And they're $13 for a bag of them, and you get a couple of each shape. But they're just so useful for weighing down patterns because they're the shape of the patterns. So you can go right to the edge or right around the curve, and they keep them nice and secure while I'm pinning them down or whatever you're doing, or if you need to cut things out. But they've been just super great. I use them all the time. They're not super heavy, but they're heavy enough, to hold down tissue paper. And they come, have like a bag of them. And so they put the link in the chat. Super great. And Kelly says, I use my glass fermentation weights. I'm not even sure what those are. I would have to look those up. I don't even know what those are. But these have just been super great. I use them all the time. You can tell like my bag's falling apart. But I really like them. So, and I know you can get pattern weights like wherever. I just find that these ones are super great. And I actually need to like invest in another bag because I could use like a few more while I'm cutting things out. Or yeah, that's because I should just sew a bag holder. And you know what? I feel like, I don't know if anyone else has this problem, but like when you sew a lot, you still end up overlooking like all the simple things that you could do. And like your partner bugs you that you haven't sewn on a button for them because you just keep forgetting, or you just like don't think about it because we're busy like sewing grand things and don't think about like all the little things that we can do. So those were the things, the main things that I wanted to show you. I hope that you saw something new or something that you really want to get. They're all things that I plan on using or use all the time. And maybe if you have a tool that you really like, you could put it in the chat. But those are the things that I really wanted to show you. And I only had a half hour, so I was like trying to get through everything that I could show you as soon as I possibly could. But I hope that was useful to you. I hope you enjoyed seeing some of these things. And I'm going to come back again next month with a new episode. And I have to think, I haven't decided yet what I'm going to talk about. But if you are interested, oh, my cat's coming in. But you can also look at my CosMom my newsletters on Patreon, and there's a lot of useful information there. So I haven't put out a new one in a while, but there's a backlog of about over a year's worth of newsletters on there that are completely free, that you can go through and look at for sewing tips, for purchasing cosplays, for wig styling, for dyeing, for all kinds of things. So if you are interested in learning more, you can jump onto Patreon and search for CosMom, and it should bring it up, and you can go through all of it and look at the different ones. So I thank you so much for joining me and for joining Cost Talk Live. And I will see you again next month. And thank you so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Um, See you later.